World of Warcraft cities aren't just background decoration. They're where millions of players have spent thousands of hours idling, dueling outside the auction house, and arguing in general chat. Some of these cities are genuinely brilliant, others are a handful of huts in a canyon. So today we're breaking down the best cities in WoW and everything that makes them iconic, starting with one that has an identity crisis. Orgrimmar is the seat of Horde power, the political and military nerve center of an entire faction. It is also, by most accounts, a couple dozen mud huts wedged into some rocks, which is, not ideal. Here's the thing, Orgrimmar has incredible lore behind it, named after Orgrim Doomhammer, founded by Thrall and the Orcish refugees who crossed to Kalimdor after Warcraft 3, carved directly into the canyon systems of northern Durotar. On paper, this city should feel like a fortress built by survivors who clawed a civilization out of nothing. In practice, it looks like someone set up a campsite and then just never left. The layout is actually interesting, and several distinct valleys connected by winding pathways, with the central valley serving as the economic and political heart. Auction house, banks, throne room, everything that matters. But the problem is scale. You walk through this supposedly massive capital and you could see the entire thing in about 45 seconds. It feels less like a metropolis and more like a rest stop. But here's where it gets complicated. When Cataclysm dropped, Blizzard overhauled Orgrimmar. They expanded the city, slapped iron fortifications over everything to reflect Garrosh's militaristic reign. The city got bigger and meaner, but somehow that made it worse. All that Garrosh era metal plating turned a rough but charming Orcish settlement into an industrial scrapyard. Hey Thrall, what happened to Orgrimmar? Oh yeah, Garrosh welded sheet metal to everything, like really tied the place together. Multiple redesigns later, the Horde's greatest city still feels like it can't decide what it wants to be when it grows up. But if Orgrimmar struggles with looking like a real city, its Alliance counterpart has the exact opposite reputation. Stormwind City? Stormwind is the city that every Alliance player pictures when they close their eyes and think of World of Warcraft. And honestly, it earns that. This is a city that's been standing for roughly 1,200 years in the lore, and Blizzard designed it to feel like every single one of those years matters. Here's the thing about Stormwind that most people don't consciously notice but absolutely feel. The city is tiny, like genuinely small in terms of actual playable space, but it doesn't feel small. And that's the trick. Blizzard packed buildings so densely together, carved canals through the streets, and stacked everything vertically so that when you're walking through at ground level, your brain fills in the gaps. You see rooftops layered behind rooftops, alleyways disappearing into shadow, and NPCs going about their business, and your brain goes, yeah, this is a massive medieval capital. It's not. It's the illusion of a city, but it's one of the best illusions in the entire game. Compare that to Orgrimmar, which is essentially a handful of huts scattered across some canyons and asks you to believe it's the beating heart of an entire faction. Stormwind actually commits to the bit. The layout helps too. You've got functionally distinct districts that make the place feel like a real urban center. The trade district handles commerce. The cathedral district handles being dramatic. Dwarven district exists. The docks connect you to distant continents. And then sitting at the very back of it all is Stormwind Keep, the ceremonial center of the entire Alliance. Walk through those gates and you genuinely feel like you're entering the seat of power for half the world. But the real hidden gem of Stormwind is the House of Nobles. On RP servers, this place is basically a live political drama running 24 hours a day. Players have built elaborate ongoing narratives about aristocratic intrigue, backroom deals, and noble houses scheming against each other. It's like Game of Thrones, except everyone's a level 70 human paladin named something like Aldrich Valorheart, which is, not ideal. ideal, but if Stormwind sells the fantasy of a sprawling human kingdom, the next city sells something completely different, an entire civilization carved into the heart of a mountain, Ironforge. If you played Alliance during vanilla, you remember the first time you walked into Ironforge. You remember it because it literally stopped you in your tracks. This massive cavernous dwarven stronghold carved directly into the heart of a mountain with a giant pool of molten metal sitting right in the center, like it was no big deal. Most cities in WoW feel like they were built on the land. Ironforge feels like it was built inside the earth itself. This is the ancestral capital of the Bronzebeard dwarves and one of the oldest continuously inhabited settlements on the entire planet. A city that has survived the Horde's arrival, the Scourge invasion, and basically every other existential threat Azeroth has thrown at it. The mountain didn't care, the dwarves didn't care. They just kept forging weapons and drinking ale, presumably at the same time. The Great Forge at the center isn't just the city's namesake, it's the cultural soul of the entire dwarven civilization. A massive ring of molten metal surrounded by anvils and workstations, symbolizing a commitment to weaponcraft that goes back thousands of years. If you were leveling blacksmithing or enchanting, you ended up here whether you planned to or not. And once you arrived, you stayed, because the city was just that well designed. The layout is a perfect circle radiating outward from that central forge. Tinkertown tucked away in one section, where the gnomes set up shop after losing Gnome Regan, tinkering away on inventions that probably violate several safety regulations. The military ward, the mystic ward, the Hall of Explorers, everything connected, everything accessible, everything making logical sense. Which is, you know, not something every WoW city can claim. Here's where it gets a little sad though. The Council of Three Hammers still governs from these halls. The architecture is still arguably the best in the entire game, but walk into Ironforge on a modern server and you'll find maybe 6 people standing around the auction house. Portal systems, expansion hubs, and the general march of progress turned one of WoW's greatest cities into a beautifully crafted ghost town. Veteran players will tell you their first trip through those gates was a formative gaming memory. They just won't tell you the last time they went back, but if you think an empty city is depressing, wait until you see one that was literally built on top of a tomb full of corpses. The Undercity. Most cities in World of Warcraft are built on top of something. The Undercity was built inside something. Specifically the royal crypts and sewers of the Kingdom of Lordaeron, which is the kind of real estate decision you can only make when you're already dead. Here's what makes it genuinely haunting. The Forsaken, the undead faction that calls this place home, used to be the living citizens of Lord Aaron. Farmers, soldiers, nobles. They died, got raised as undead by the Scourge, broke free from the Lich King's control, and then looked around at the ruins of the kingdom they once belonged to and said, yeah, we'll take the basement. They built their new civilization in the dungeons of their old one. That's not just dark world building. That's poetry. The layout was a 4-wing design radiating from a central hub, and the community has spent years noting how closely it mirrors the Naxxrama's necropolis. 4 wings, a central command structure, a steady supply of corpses. The math checks out. But the real legacy of the Undercity is how absolutely impossible it was to navigate. Multiple vertical levels, winding corridors, and zero intuitive signposting meant unfamiliar players would routinely get lost for 20 minutes trying to find the auction house. Atmospherically perfect. A twisting underground labyrinth of plague labs and shadow magic practitioners feels exactly right for an undead capital, practically. You'd zone in looking for the bank and end up in the apothecarium watching someone brew biological weapons, which is, you know, not ideal. Everything about the place reinforced what made the Forsaken unique. They didn't care about survival in the traditional sense. They cared about power over death itself. And then Blizzard destroyed it. During Battle for Azeroth, the Undercity was blighted and rendered functionally inaccessible. Gone. One of the original capital cities from 2004 wiped off the map entirely. No other city removal in WoW's history hit quite like that. Players who had spent over a decade navigating those cursed hallways suddenly couldn't go back. It remains one of the most dramatic geographical shifts the game has ever seen, and proof that Blizzard was willing to permanently alter the world players grew up in. But if the Undercity was a monument to death and decay, the next city on our list is the exact opposite. Built hundreds of feet in the air, surrounded by golden plains and radiating pure peace. Thunder Bluff. After all that darkness and decay, let's talk about the exact opposite. Thunder Bluff is the Tauren capital, and it might be the most universally loved city in the entire game. Alliance players will admit it. Horde players will fight you over it. Nobody has a bad word to say about this place. Built on towering mesas several hundred feet above the golden plains of Mulgore, Thunder Bluff doesn't look like a city that was constructed. It looks like it grew there. The entire settlement sits on top of massive flat-topped rock formations connected by long wooden bridges, and every single structure is made from wood, hide, and natural stone. Zero metal fortifications, zero imposing walls. The Tauren philosophy is harmony with the land, and Thunder Bluff is that philosophy turned into architecture. You stand on the edge of any platform and you're looking out over endless rolling grasslands bathed in warm golden light, gentle breezes, perpetual good weather. It's basically a vacation. But here's the thing that makes Thunder Bluff genuinely unique from a gameplay perspective. You can't just walk in. The only way up is through elevator systems on the southwestern and northeastern sides of the mesas, or you fly in on a wyvern from Orgrimmar. That's it. No gates, no roads leading to the front door, just sheer cliff faces and a couple of rickety lifts. This created real geographical isolation that no other capital city has. It also created a very specific rite of passage where new Tauren players would confidently walk off the edge of the mesa and fall to their death, which is, not ideal. The city was established by Cairn Bloodhoof, one of the wisest and most respected leaders the Horde ever had. He built Thunder Bluff as a permanent home for his people after generations of nomadic life across the plains, and for a while everything was peaceful. But Cairn's story doesn't end well. He challenged Garrosh Hellscream to a duel over the direction of the Horde, and Garrosh killed him. The weapon was poisoned without Garrosh's knowledge, but the result was the same. Cairn died, and the city he built became his monument. Every time you visit Thunder Bluff, there's this bittersweet weight underneath all that beauty. The old chief is gone, and the warm breeze feels a little different knowing that. But if Thunder Bluff represents the best of what a faction capital can feel like, the next city on our list threw out the entire concept of factions altogether. Shattrath City. For years, World of Warcraft had one rule that nobody questioned. Alliance cities are for Alliance players, Horde cities are for Horde players. You go to the other faction city, you get stabbed. That's just how it worked. Then Burning Crusade launched in 2007, and Blizzard did something that fundamentally changed the game forever. They built a city for everyone. Shattrath City sits in the northwestern corner of Tarakar Forest, on the shattered remains of Draenor, and it was the first major hub in WoW history designed to serve both factions equally. No guards attacking you on sight, no restricted districts, just Alliance and Horde players standing next to each other, using the same banks, the same vendors, the same everything. The name literally means dwelling of light in Draenei, which is fitting because the whole place is run by the Sha'tar, an organization of Naru, those giant floating crystals of holy energy. Their leader, Adal, hovers in the Terrace of Light like a divine chandelier, quietly judging everyone's gear score. And that Terrace of Light wasn't just pretty, it contained portal hubs connecting to every major faction capital in the game. Stormwind, Orgrimmar, Ironforge, Thunder Bluff, all of them accessible from one central location. Overnight, Shattrath became the most important travel hub in WoW. You basically had to make it your home city or accept a life of unnecessary flight paths. But here's where it gets really interesting. Shattrath featured WoW's first truly faction-neutral auction house. Now before this, Alliance and Horde economies were completely separate. Two entirely different markets operating in parallel with zero interaction. Shattrath broke that wall down. Suddenly, a Horde player could sell to an Alliance buyer and vice versa. Cross-faction commerce just existing like that was genuinely groundbreaking for the time. The bigger legacy, though, is what Shattrath proved to Blizzard. Players didn't need factional exclusivity to care about a city. Give them portals, give them services, give them a cool atmosphere with floating light beings, and they'll show up regardless of whether the city flies their flag. That single realization shaped every expansion hub that followed. Shattrath wasn't just a new city, it was a proof of concept, and the very next expansion took that concept, made it float, and dropped it over a frozen continent. Dalaran, a floating city of mages hovering above a frozen wasteland. That's not a metaphor. That's literally what Dalaran is, and honestly, it might be the single most iconic hub city in World of Warcraft's entire history. Dalaran served as the neutral hub for Wrath of the Lich King, WoW's second expansion, and it earned that role by being everything Shattrath was, but better in almost every measurable way. The concept alone sells itself. You're fighting the Lich King across a frozen continent full of undead horrors, and your home base is a magical metropolis suspended in the sky above all of it. That's not just functional, that's a statement. Here's what made Dalaran actually work, though, beyond the spectacle. The city was compact. Deliberately, aggressively compact. After years of players sprinting across Orgrimmar's sprawling valleys or getting lost in the Undercity's circular nightmare, Dalaran said, what if everything you need is within a 30-second walk? The bank, the auction house, the trainers, the inn, all of it clustered together in a way that respected your time. It set a new standard for hub efficiency that every expansion city after it had to live up to. But Dalaran wasn't just a convenience machine, it had personality. The city featured distinct faction-specific quarters, so Alliance and Horde players each had their own atmospheric zones while still sharing access to central services. You got the neutral hub experience without losing your factional identity entirely. Welcome to our floating magic city. Your side is over there. Try not to kill each other near the fountain. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Players couldn't actually access Dalaran until reaching level 74 through normal gameplay. You're questing through Northrend, you know this incredible city is floating up there somewhere, and the game just says, not yet. Mage teleportation or specific quest items could bypass this restriction, but for most players, it was a gate. Blizzard eventually relaxed this through quality of life updates, which tells you everything about how their philosophy on accessibility evolved over time. Turns out, telling people they can't go to the cool place doesn't make the cool place cooler. It just makes people annoyed. The ultimate proof of Dalaran's legacy? Blizzard brought it back. When Legion launched, Dalaran returned as the primary hub city, making it the only city in WoW history to serve as the main hub for two separate expansions. They could have built something new, they had the budget, the team, the technology. They chose Dalaran anyway because sometimes you don't mess with perfection. But if Dalaran represents peak magical fantasy, wait until you see the city that might actually top it in sheer architectural ambition. Suramar City. Most cities in WoW tell you what they are the moment you walk in. Suramar tells you what it wants you to believe and then slowly peels that lie apart over dozens of hours. This is an ancient night elven metropolis on the Broken Isles, the seat of power for the Nightborn civilization, and it's one of the few cities in this entire game that actually has something to say. Before the Sundering shattered the world into continents, Suramar was one of the largest and most important cities in the Kaldori Empire. Like, we're talking about a civilization that commanded dominion over the majority of ancient Kalimdor. That's not a minor footnote. That's a superpower, and when you first arrive, it looks like it. The architecture is stunning, elegant spires, arcane-infused walkways, an entire civilization that radiates sophistication and magical mastery. On the surface, this is a city of nobility and grace, the kind of place where everyone speaks in measured tones and drinks from crystal glasses. But here's where it gets dark. The entire Nightborn population is fueled by the Nightwell, a corrupted font of arcane energy that the city depends on for survival. Every citizen needs it. Without it, they wither into mindless husks called withered, which means the beautiful architecture, the refined culture, the elegant society, all of it is built on top of a dependency so severe that cutting the supply doesn't just inconvenience people, it kills them. The Nightwell is essentially running the longest intervention in Warcraft history, except nobody wants to be intervened upon because the alternative is literally losing your mind and your body, and that's what makes Suramar special. The addiction metaphor running through every layer of this city gives it emotional weight that most WoW locations simply don't have. You're not just clearing demons out of pretty buildings. You're watching a civilization choose between survival and corruption, between freedom and the thing that's slowly destroying them. The tension between how beautiful everything looks and how desperate everything actually is drives some of the most compelling storytelling WoW has ever attempted. This is the city that proved Blizzard could do morally complex urban narrative design. Not just bad guys live here or good guys defend this, actual gray area, actual consequences, characters you feel genuinely conflicted about helping because the right answer doesn't exist. The Nightborn eventually became a playable race, which means thousands of players now carry Suramar as their cultural homeland. Long after Legion content became outdated, people still have a personal connection to this city. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when a city makes you feel something beyond convenient place to repair my gear. But if Suramar proved WoW could build a city with emotional depth, the next city on our list takes things in a completely different direction, trading arcane towers for salt-stained docks and political intrigue. Borelus. For most of WoW's history, Alliance cities had a very specific vibe. Clean stone walls, noble banners, maybe a cathedral or two. Everything felt like it was built by people who ironed their tabards. Borelus threw all of that into the ocean. The capital of Kultira sits on a massive strait within Tiergard Sound, and the second you step foot in it, you realize this is not Stormwind with a fishing dock. This is a full-blown maritime city, built by people who've spent generations fighting the sea and each other. The architecture is soaked in nautical influence. Thick timber frames, rope rigging woven into the infrastructure, barnacle-crusted stonework, ships crammed into every available inch of harbor space. It looks like someone took a pirate port from a fantasy novel and scaled it up to capital city proportions. And here's the thing, Borelus isn't trying to impress you. Stormwind wants you to walk through those gates and feel inspired. Borelus wants you to watch your pockets. As the seat of House Proudmoore, the city technically functions as one of the largest ports on Azeroth and a center of naval military power. But when you actually explore the place, what you find is political corruption, organized crime running entire districts, and a population more concerned with surviving the next storm than pledging loyalty to the Alliance war effort. The Harbor District alone tells you everything you need to know. This is a city built around dangerous waters, and the danger didn't stay outside the walls. Each district reflects a different slice of Kultira society. You've got your merchant quarters, your military installations, your slums, where the Ashvenate Trading Company basically operates as a shadow government. It's layered in a way that earlier Alliance hubs never bothered with. Stormwind has a bad neighborhood or two if you squint. Borelus has entire power structures competing for control of the city while a war rages outside. That's what makes it genuinely interesting as a capital. It's morally ambiguous in a way the Alliance rarely gets to be. This isn't a shining beacon of civilization, it's a gritty, rain-soaked port town where everybody's got an angle, and the line between ally and criminal is about as thin as the hull on a freehold smuggling vessel. Blizzard basically said, what if the Alliance hub felt lived in and slightly dangerous? And the answer was one of the most atmospheric cities they've ever built. But if you think Borelus brought the aesthetic ambition, wait until you see what the Horde got across the sea. Dazar Aller. A Dazar Aller might be the single most visually impressive city Blizzard has ever built. And I can prove it because every other capital in this game is some variation of a castle, a fortress, or collection of buildings arranged in a circle. Dazar Aller is a colossal golden pyramid housing an empire that's been around for thousands of years. There's nothing else like it. The pyramid serves as the royal palace of the Zandalari Empire and doubled as the primary Horde hub during Battle for Azeroth. And the contrast with its Alliance counterpart couldn't be more perfect. Borelus is this gritty, rain-soaked booked maritime port where everyone looks like they owe someone money. Dazara Lore is a gleaming monument to an ancient civilization that figured out architecture while everyone else was still living in mud huts. The scale of the thing is absurd. You walk in and immediately feel like you're trespassing somewhere important. What makes it work is the cultural specificity. The Zandalari aren't just generic trolls. Their architectural style draws from ancient Calderae civilization's splendor while maintaining distinctly troll characterization, creating this unique fusion that feels both familiar and completely alien. Every surface is covered in gold and intricate carvings. Every staircase feels like it was built for someone twice your size. The whole city radiates the confidence of a civilization that's been doing this for millennia and knows exactly how good it is. The Zandalari joining the Horde was a massive narrative moment, and Dazar Alor was the physical symbol of that alliance, which is exactly why the alliance decided to attack it. The Battle of Dazar Alor was a full-scale military assault designed to destroy the Zandalari fleet and sever the bond between the Zandalari and the Horde before it could solidify. Here's where it gets complicated. The community immediately started debating whether this was strategically brilliant or catastrophically stupid, because nothing unites two groups faster than a shared enemy kicking down the front door. You want to break an alliance? Maybe don't give them a reason to fight side by side. The attack was meant to weaken the Horde's position, but there's a strong argument it did the exact opposite. Nothing says welcome to the faction quite like defending your ancient golden pyramid together against invaders. And honestly, even setting the politics aside, just standing at the base of that pyramid and looking up is one of those moments where you remember this is a game that's been running for 2 decades and they're still capable of building something that makes your jaw drop. But if you think Dazar Alor is impressive, the next one on our list tried something completely different, building a city that's basically a dragon lounge. Valdragon. Valdragon is what happens when Blizzard sits down and asks one question: what do players actually need from a city? The answer, it turns out, is everything in one place and zero nonsense getting to it. The capital of the Dragonflight expansion takes the neutral hub concept that started with Shatrath and strips away every ounce of fat. Both factions share the space. There's a palatial center with faction-specific portals so you can get wherever you need to go, and the core services, your bank, auction house, mailbox, and innkeeper are all sitting in the central plaza within about 15 seconds of each other. You land, you do your business, you leave. That's it. That's the city. Here's the thing though, the layout isn't just functional, it's genuinely clever. Valdraken is organized into distinct wards, one for each of the 5 dragonflights, and each ward is color-coded to match its dragonflight's identity. Red for the red dragonflight, bronze for the bronze. You get the idea. It's an environmental wayfinding system baked directly into the architecture. You never need to open a map because the city literally tells you where you are through color alone. Elegant is the word. Most cities in WoW require you to memorize a mental map after getting lost 14 times. Valdraken just shows you, but the quality of life improvement that matters most to actual players, the auction house doesn't require engineering to access. Previous hubs gated their auction houses behind profession requirements, meaning if you weren't an engineer, you were out of luck or flying back to Stormwind. Valdraken just hands it to everyone. A small change on paper, enormous in practice. The city also has some genuinely charming details that give it personality beyond pure efficiency. The Rostrum of Transformation lets you customize your dragon mount's appearance, which is a nice touch. There's a Whelp Day Care, which is exactly what it sounds like, tiny baby dragons being looked after. And the Where and Rest Inn is exclusively for Drakthar characters, giving that race a little corner of the city that feels specifically theirs. So, hey, so where does that leave Valdraken in the grand ranking of WoW cities? It's undeniably the most player-friendly hub Blizzard has ever built. Everything works. Everything is accessible. Everything is where you expect it to be. But there's a trade-off buried in all that convenience. The older cities, your Stormwinds, your Iron Forges, they had character precisely because they were messy and sprawling and occasionally frustrating to navigate. Valdrakken is pleasant, it's efficient, it's also, if we're being honest, a little sterile compared to the cities that came before it. That's the cost of optimization. You gain convenience, you lose a bit of soul. But if you think Blizzard stopped refining the formula there, wait until you see what they did underground. Dornogal, 20 years. That's how long it took World of Warcraft to go from canyon huts baking in the Durotar sun to a full-blown neutral metropolis buried underneath the planet. Dornogal is the newest hub city in the game, introduced with the War Within on August 26, 2024, and it's built entirely underground, which, you know, is a sentence that would have made zero sense to anyone playing this game in 2004. The city sits deep within the subterranean world of Azeroth and serves as the seat of the Earthen, an ancient race of Titan-forged beings who've been carving stone longer than most civilizations have existed. Their craftsmanship is everywhere. Massive towers stretch upward into cavern ceilings, bioluminescent lighting replaces the sun, and the whole place manages to feel warm and alive despite the fact that there's literally a continent sitting on top of it. Blizzard solved the, how do you make an underground city not feel like a basement problem by going aggressively vertical. Towers, bridges, layered plazas, all designed to trick your brain into forgetting you're hundreds of feet below the surface, and it's neutral. Both factions share the space. No separate districts, no awkward standoffs near the auction house, just everyone coexisting in a shared hub the way Shatrath first promised back in 2007. Here's the thing though. Dornogal is also the endpoint of a design philosophy that's been quietly evolving for 2 decades. The original capitals were messy, confusing, and deeply factional. You got lost in the Undercity. You fell off Thunderbluff. You spent 10 minutes running across Orgrimmar to find a vendor. And people loved them for it, because they felt like places that existed for reasons beyond your convenience. Modern hubs don't do that. Dornogal, like Valdrakken before it, puts everything within sprinting distance. Bank, auction house, profession trainers, all compact, all efficient. It respects your time in a way that Ironforge never even considered. But there's an ongoing debate about whether that efficiency has cost something, whether the old cities had a kind of soul that came specifically from being inconvenient, from forcing you to wander and discover and occasionally get completely lost. The answer is probably both. Dornogal is a better hub. The originals were better worlds, and somewhere between a subterranean earthen metropolis and a bunch of orc huts in a canyon, Blizzard figured out how to build cities that millions of people would remember for the rest of their lives. That's not a bad legacy for a game about clicking on things. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.